Glad to have you here. This is the first time we're doing sort of an event like this. So it's a bit of an experiment, but it's basically sort of a conference kind of talk / workshop. I'll quickly start by introducing myself. My name is Youri and I'm co-founder and CEO at CodeGrade, but mainly former teaching assistant and student computer science at the University of Amsterdam. That's also where CodeGrade got founded. So we're a spin-off. Basically due to our own sort of, how do you say that, experiences as students and also as teaching assistants, that the grading workflow for coding, programming assignments was not quite there yet. So basically our platform aims to make that a lot easier, mainly more efficient for the lecturer, teaching assistant teachers, and improve the feedback for the students. So what are we going to do today? So basically the goal is to give you sort of a overview of how to grade and mainly auto-grade coding assignments. And we're going to do that in sort of a workshop kind of way where we're going to convert a manually graded sort of Sudoku solver, that's sort of the assignment we always use, into a CodeGrade assignment, where we're going to take you step by step from really simple, like not even auto-grading kind of things, to very simple auto-grading, to more advanced with unit testing, code quality checking, and that kind of things. And really the goal is to show auto-grading as sort of a part of a bigger toolbox, where there are also a lot of other more manual grading tools that you can still use, because in the end, the teacher is always sort of the, cannot really be replaced by a computer just yet. Hopefully that won't change much in the future. After that, we can also, so as you've seen this, basically, after this workshop, you should be able to set up a CodeGrade assignment. That's sort of the goal. And the nice thing is, if you want to try that out yourself at the end, we can basically give you access to a sandbox environment. So we have a little form, Google form, and basically we need to know your email address so we can invite you to that. And the sandbox I will be showing you today is basically exactly the same one to which you would get access to. I will also put my contact details at the end, so you can of course always email me at any time as well. So let's get to the fun part. And for this, we sort of have the mountain of gradeness, which is our very stupid joke, where we're going to go in sort of 5 steps from a traditionally graded assignment where students hand in their code in the learning management system, like in a zip or just like the code file, to sort of a code-graded assignment. And along the way, we're going to add a couple of things. So the first thing we're going to do is basically not auto-grade anything, just make it an assignment within the learning management system. So that can be Blackboard or Canvas, Moodle, Brightspace, basically any learning management system that you use at your institution. And just by making it that, we can already like give inline comments. Then in the next step, we're going to add a rubric. And a rubric is a really nice way, you're probably familiar with it, but it's a really nice way to sort of categorize the grade into certain categories, so the student knows what is expected of them, but then also the teacher has to fill it in accordingly, so there's more consistency. And then finally, the main part of this is sort of adding auto-grading stuff to that. And we're going to do it along the way. So let's start with like introducing every aspect, and then we're just going to do it live and see how that goes. So the first thing that we're going to add soon is those inline comments. So basically what CodeGrade allows you to do is sort of, it has a code viewer, so you can click on any line and give some feedback to the students in a sort of more efficient way. And the students will be able to see that inline as well. And then of course there are sort of snippets, so you can give that more efficiently. And bear with me, I'm just going to run through all of these sort of 5 steps really quickly, so you sort of know what we're talking about when we're actually doing it live in the sandbox environment that I have here. The next step we will do, as I said before, is adding a rubric. So categorizing the grade in sort of functionality, code style, structure, those kinds of things. And the goal here is making grading consistent and explainable. And then finally, we're going to go into the auto grading, and we're going to look at two things, or three things actually. So that's sort of functionality testing with like very simple sort of black box testing, where you give an input, expect some output, to sort of a more unit testing approach, and finally some more code quality testing. So we're actually using static code analysis tools to automatically assess the code quality. Things like unit testing, they are not specific CodeGrade things. You can also use that without, of course, rubrics as well. Those are already available in your learning management system, so you don't have to use CodeGrade, of course. And then sort of the goal with that auto grading approach is very similar to how you would use continuous integration in a company. So you write some code and you sort of run tests on it, get feedback on that, and you improve. And we want to get that to the students, basically. So they write code in their favorite editor. I'm going to be using VS Code. Hand it into the CodeGrade assignment, either by just uploading the files or using something like Git. And then immediately after handing, they will see some results, basically. Am I going right, or am I doing things wrong? And then they'll basically be able to write code again and sort of get feedback and have this sort of feedback loop. I'm going to skip this quote, but basically what we see often is that CodeGrade can save a lot of time and students get faster feedback. Then the last thing, basically, when we go to code grading, we also have sort of a plagiarism detection tool. So you can make sure your students aren't copying off each other, and also some analysis results. So with the sort of introduction out of the way, let's get started. So what I have here is an editor, and I have a terminal. And this is sort of the assignment we're gonna auto grade in the end. Is that all visible correctly? I think it should be. But basically what you have here is a sort of Sudoku solver. So this is quite an advanced assignment already that you might see in sort of an algorithms class, or maybe at the end of an introduction to programming course. But the nice thing with this assignment is that it can show a lot of different sort of auto grading tools. So this is the solution, and as a teacher, I usually have a solution available. And I can actually like run this. And then basically it takes a empty Sudoku as input. So I'm just gonna copy paste this really simple 4x4 one in, and then it will output the solved Sudoku. So that's sort of what the students have to create in a hopefully efficient way. So let's look at how that looks sort of like in a traditional sense. So we're at, if we go back to this sort of mountain, we're like all the way over here. So I have a little Canvas course here. Actually, you should go to this one. So in this particular example, I'm using Canvas, but I could be using any learning management system, such as Blackboard or any of the other one. And I think I have sort of a traditionally graded assignment around here. So this is a normal Canvas assignment. And if I go into the student view, how that looks like, I can press new attempt, and then I can basically upload a file. So I can put in my sudoku.py and I can submit it. And sort of this is what students usually do, which we see a lot. And that's it. I only get feedback when the teacher grades it. So especially in Canvas, if I want to grade this, I can go into this like speed grader that Canvas has. And you actually see the file here. But unfortunately, Canvas doesn't have a code viewer or something, so it cannot really do anything. So I would sort of like download it or download all submissions. It actually, because I uploaded twice, it renames the files, which is even worse. And then I would sort of copy it into a working folder. And then similarly, as I have here, I would sort of like play around with it. So let's say this is the student submission. I would do exactly what I was doing here, copy paste some like results, see if it's working. I could also, in this case, like copy in like some unit tests and then like sort of run PyTest and sort of do this all by hand. So I actually wrote some tests here. Then I would give it a grade and add some comments. So I might open it up in my code viewer here and look at it and give some comments to the student. So the first thing we're going to do here is get rid of all this Canvas stuff and actually make this a CodeGrade assignment. So once it's integrated with your learning management system, I can go into assignment, press plus assignment, and give it a name. So CodeGrade assignment. I'll give it a number of points as well. And then basically, instead of like a file upload sort of submission type, we can go to external tool and then add a CodeGrade assignment. So it's all integrated with that. I'm going to give it a due date for tomorrow, save and publish. And that's sort of the main setup out of the way. If I go into the student view now and do sort of the same approach, what I get here is CodeGrade loads within Canvas or within Blackboard, whatever. And I can upload files here. So I didn't do any setup at this stage, so I can just upload the file. And then after pressing submit, basically it adds the code viewer. So basically you as the instructor can add in some comments. So if I go back to the teacher view now, what I can basically do is go to the student and then look at it right here. I can give it a grade. So it's out of 10 points. Let's give it a 7, submit that, and it just works like a normal Canvas assignment, but I can also give some feedback. So I could say something like, you should add some documentation here. And as I said, you have sort of these snippets you can add. So I can add the current text as sort of a snippet. And then when I see sort of the same kinds of mistakes, either with this student or with a different student, I can just add that in and sort of give that efficiently. And then typing in is great. This is kind of awkward. So we're going to try and add a rubric soon to this. But this is sort of the basic way. So what we basically done is, if I go back, and it's actually letting me, all right. So we added some inline comments, and this basically takes no time, which is nice. But then, of course, we want to automate this a lot more. So as a teacher, I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to add a rubric. What I'm going to do here is also I'm going to open it in a new tab. So it's a bit nicer for me to look at. And I'm actually going to quickly open up the same assignment so I don't have to copy over everything. And if I go to the settings here, this is sort of the settings page, which is similar to the Canvas settings, but you have a lot more possibilities here. So a nice thing that you can do here is also do things like set a cool-off period. So students can only hand in once every like 60 minutes. But actually, the first thing I'm going to do is create some hand-in instructions. So I'm basically going to say I'm going to deny all files, and students should only hand in a sudoku.py. So at least they're handing in the correct file. And they sort of have no issues there. They might need some helper files, so I'm also going to allow them to hand in any other Python file, but nothing else. So sort of they shouldn't hand in any junk. I only want to deal with the files I actually have to grade. Then the next part in setting it up is creating a rubric. So I'm going to go to this rubric tab, and I'm going to create one. I'm just going to create a new rubric. And here you have the categories. And you see here 2 options. So I can either create sort of a discrete one. And the easiest to know what it is by just clicking on it. And here I can give a description to this category. So the first thing I think is important is the code structure. And let's say this assignment in total has 10 points. And I think code structure should be maybe 4 points of that. So I'm going to copy paste in sort of a description. So this is going to be a manual category. We're never going to do this automatically because this is quite hard to do automatically. Basically checking if the code is dry, if the implementation is sort of like Pythonic and efficient in this case. And then the students have either 0 points for sort of insufficient. You could say something like no functions are used. It's really implemented sort of in a one big function, and they should implement it in a sort of object-oriented way. And then we can say 1 point. Let's say it needs some improvement, and then we're going to copy paste description in there. And sort of like 2 points, which is good. And let's in the end do sort of 4 points for excellent. So they can get a bit more, there's a bit more of a gap. But you can, of course, use like any sort of like grading scheme that you would like. So that's sort of the code structure, and we're never going to do this automatically. This is going to be sort of a hybrid manual automatic graded assignment. But also things like the functionality could be important. And for this, I'm going to use a continuous category. This we're going to call functionality of your Sudoku solver. And dry is by the way, is a abbreviation for don't repeat yourself. So they should put things in functions and stuff like that. And then give this a description. And a continuous category is basically you get anywhere from 0 to the maximum number of points. So let's put 3 points on that. So 4 points for the code structure, 3 points for the functionality. And then the last one I'm going to do is code quality. So we're also going to use some automatic tools here to assess if the style is conformed to the PEP 8 style guide, which is sort of the default Python style guide. If you Google PEP 8 style, you can basically find how you should indent and stuff like that. And you have some excellent automatic tools to sort of do that. That integrate with CodeGrade. So we'll do the 3 points for that. So we should get 10, yes. And basically submit this. And without setting up any sort of automatic grading, if I go back to that student submission here, we can actually fill this in. So we could also manually grade this. So let's say they have 50% on the functionality. And you sort of see that automatically the grade pops out. So that sort of increases your consistency here. But the thing we want, of course, is to automatically fill this in. So you don't have to go in here and run stuff yourself anymore. So let's do that. So going back here, going to the settings, and then this is sort of the magic tab you want to see. This is auto test. And this is basically where you can set up your automatic tests. And once you start with that, I always just recommend looking at your solution, what kind of testing you want to do. So in this case, the students have to create sort of like a solve function and stuff like that. So I've also written some sort of like unit tests here. And this is a more advanced way of testing, but it can be very powerful. But we're also gonna start small. So I'm going to go back, press create auto test. And our automatic testing system basically has sort of a setup portion and then the actual tests that you connect to a rubric category. So let's start with the setup. And there are some sort of options. So when do you want the results to be visible? Probably immediately, so they can test with it. Here you can upload any files you might need. And we're not going to do that yet. And then you have sort of some setup scripts. So basically what's happening as soon as a student hands in, we spin up an Ubuntu server on our cloud environment, and it's running all your tests that you've set up and doing any setup that you might need on the student's code. And then afterwards, it reports back the results and kills the machine again. So the nice thing about that, if you have 500 students handing it at the same time, they all get run immediately. And it also gives you a lot of flexibility because you can basically do anything that runs on Linux. So any programming language, any sort of unit testing framework, or any sort of weird tool that you might use, as long as it runs on Linux or Ubuntu, it will actually run in our system as well. So it's very comparable to continuous integration, except that it's going to be a bit easier to set up. And we have some nicely built-in tools specifically for sort of grading. So what I'm going to do here is add category. And this is basically where I'm going to create my actual test. So I'm going to select which rubric category I want to fill in. So in this case, let's start with the functionality. And then I can basically create tests. And you see all of the built-in tests right here. So the first thing is the IO test, which basically give input to a program and match it to a given output. Another one is I can just execute a command, and if it's successful, this test passes. But in this case, as we were already playing around on the terminal, the nice thing is I just have a solution, so I'm just going to put in some input cases. So I'm actually going to press IO test. I'm going to give it a name, run different Sudokus. And then program to test is basically the command you want to execute, and this is executed in the student directory. So, and as we are making them hand in a sudoku.py file in the root, I can just set the program to test as python3 sudoku.py, and then I just give it my input. So I have some input cases here. This is the one I was using in the beginning. If I can actually copy this. So you see that here, and then I can expect some output. And the nice thing is I have my solution here, so I can just copy paste the output in here. Another thing you can see here is you have some options. But these ones are sort of nice. So I can put substring in here. So if students have some extra spaces around it, or have some other output around it, it still get matched. I can ignore white space, stuff like that. Could even do like a regular expression, which can also be very powerful. So I'm going to give this a name. This is a 4x4. Then I'm just going to add another input case for this test. And again, let's just copy this sort of 9x9 Sudoku. And then to get it, I'm just going to like copy paste this in here. And there we have the solution. So the nice thing about this kind of testing is that it's really easy to set up. So it'll just take me like a couple minutes to set this up, as I have a solution available. And then I have a more advanced 9x9, which I'm also going to copy paste in here. Advanced. And then let's run it through the Sudoku solver. And there we go. And if I press save, yeah, I got a little message that I'm already using this for manual grading because I had that filled in. And you can basically see that here. What I'm actually going to do is I'm gonna like make this a bit nicer for the students to read. So if I go to advanced options here, I can actually supply like a template. So what I'm going to do is, that's fine. If I do this, I actually see, mistake. So what I have now is run different Sudokus, and then it's running a 4x4 Sudoku, simple 9x9, and advanced 9x9. So basically this is set up now. I could basically start this and it will actually run it on the student that already handed in. As I handed in my solution here, this should run correctly, hopefully. And I sort of have my first like simple testing. You see it starts up immediately. And it should run in a second and basically show 3 green check marks. If I click on this, you can see the actual output of the student was this, and this was the expected output. So this is all correct. So that's first part of testing done. That only took a couple minutes. So let's look at a bit more advanced testing as well. So I'm actually going to add another category here, and I'm going to do code quality. This is actually really easy to do as well. So on your laptop, you can have like the Flake 8 tool. I have it installed. Yeah. So Flake 8 is sort of a static code analysis tool for Python, but every language sort of has one. I had it installed here, and you can see it gives a lot of errors here. So this is also some feedback we can provide to the students. We can basically say you have to hand in Flake 8, sort of Flake 8 compatible code. And we can just create a code quality step and say something like run the Flake 8 tool. And then linter, I select Flake 8. We have a couple ones installed by default, but it basically works with any tool. And we're continuously like adding new ones to this as well. You could give it some configuration as well. So let's say you don't think this error is so important, you can sort of turn them on and off. And it depends a bit per linter. So if you're using Java, there's like a lot of different kinds of tools that you have as well, or like C++, whatever. But you can turn them on and off. But the default is sort of nice. And then the nice thing is these things sort of give back. These errors have sort of a severity level in some of these linters, and you can actually set like sort of the penalty. So in this case, I'm actually going to make this, in total, we're going to be getting 3 points out of this. So I'm going to give this a weight of 3 points. And then sort of for an error, let's deduct like 5% of the points. And then for a warning, maybe 2% and 0. In fatal, let's deduct 100%. This is also something you can play around with. If I save this, yes. And it says, check the code quality using Flake 8. And if I start this up again, it will run on the student's code. If I go back here to this list, what you saw is here we got a couple of errors here, so we should expect to find these at least. And once it's starting, we should be able to see that and have the code quality be filled in automatically. So it's running again now. And these ones all pass. And then here we expect to get some more errors. So let's give it a second, and you see we get a 0.6 out of 3 points. And if you look here you see exactly all of those errors that I found here locally as well. I can also actually click on it and it will show up in the code as well. So this is really nice for the students, especially with sort of that continuous handing in. They can actually improve and then sort of hand in again and improve their code. So what I could do, let's say I'm the student here. So I found that import OS error. So I'm just going to remove that, and then hopefully I get like sort of a better grade. And you see we have those hand-in requirements now as well. So I actually have to hand in a sudoku.py and actually have to go to the correct directory. If I hand this in again, it's accepted. And then here, from a student's perspective, the test will run immediately as well. The nice thing is because this is partly manually graded as well, I get sort of a message that this is not your final result yet. This is the preliminary result. You see now we have 0.75, so we have a bit more. So we can sort of improve on this code till all those errors are gone. All right. Then let's leave the student view again, and then add that sort of final testing part to this. So I'm going to open it in a new tab again. And that's the unit testing. So there are also a lot of, like, if you have custom grading scripts, they sort of can work quite easily with CodeGrade, but we also provide unit testing. So I wrote some PyTest here. If I run PyTest, you can see 4 tests pass from test-sudoku.py. So what I'm going to do here is upload that test-sudoku.py file, submit this. So it's a fixture in CodeGrade. And then what I can do is we have sort of integrations for each unit testing framework that basically exists. And it's a bit difficult to use right now. That will be different after the summer. Basically now you sort of have to install PyTest, and specifically the wrapper we wrote around it, like you would do. So normally you would install it on your computer as well. And I'm doing that in sort of the global setup script. If you needed to install any like Python packages, you could do like something like just sudo pip3 install and then your Python package. Or if you're using Java, you can use Maven or whatever. But I can do that. And then let's add this unit test step to this functionality of the Sudoku solver. I can press unit test and then I can say run unit tests. And then this command, bear with me. It will be much easier soon, but basically CG PyTest run, and then it's the name of your unit test. And that is in the fixtures directory. So important to note, everything you upload as a fixture is sort of in the $fixtures directory. Everything you upload, the student uploads is in the $student directory. But I can just add this in. And I think this should just be it. And again, this doesn't look so nice to the students. So I actually can like create like a little template for it, and I'll just make it the name. And let's do it from like test sudoku.py. You see, I can put markdown in here, so it's a bit nicer to look at. And then once again, I can start it up, and then it should run soon again. And let's look at the unit tests. They're not that great in this example, but we're basically testing some of the functions that the student is using in the Sudoku. And the unit testing is sort of a more like gray box kind of testing, where you can test more specific things, and especially like object-oriented modules. It's also really nice to use. As a student here, you can see it's just parsing the test from the file you uploaded and saying if it's solved, if it's passed or not. So that's also quite nicely integrated, so they don't have to look at sort of the terminal output here. They can, of course, also do that. And now I sort of have this assignment set up, and it's partly automatically grade, partly manually grade. Just want to show you one more thing here. You can also make things hidden. So let's say we don't want the students to have the unit test step executed immediately. Then this only runs sort of after the due date. So if I go back to the student view here and look at the file I just handed in, what you can see here, it should start soon, but this will actually not run yet, only after the deadline has passed for this particular assignment. All right, then lastly, another thing that we want to look at is the plagiarism example. So I actually do have another example for that. So what I'm going to do is upload a test submission. So normally you would have another student upload, but I can only have one student account. And if I upload a plagiarism example of this sudoku.py, it should fail immediately. But what you basically see, this is exactly the same code, but what I did here is sort of rename this function and sort of tried to cheat the system, but it's still the same structure. So what I can do now as well is run the plagiarism checker on this. So basically go to the settings, and then once again here you have all the options. You can go to plagiarism and select the language. So I'm going to select Python. And here you also have the option to sort of select old assignments, old submissions, and run it. And it will check for all students within the same assignment, but also all the other sort of assignment or courses you checked. And once it's done, what you can see here between this test student and the other test student, it found like a 95% similarity. And if I click on it, it's actually highlighted in red here. You can see that it's still detecting this as similar code, as our tool basically checks for the structure of the code here. So this can also be really nice to help you identify those potential cases and export them as well. All right. That was how you set up a basic assignment. Let's quickly go back to the slides. And then we have done all of this. There's also some analysis possibility for full tool set. The Git integration is also really nice. So then students basically can upload through their repository, and on every push they get a new submission within CodeGrade. And of course, the LMS integration is quite vital because you want everything connected to Blackboard or Moodle or Canvas. Finally, what we also sort of do besides this, so you not only get the platform, but also sort of the onboarding, because especially auto-grading, as you've seen, it can be quite easy, but it can also be quite hard, especially if you have to go to a more like unit testing approach, and you sort of have to think about how you can make your assignments a bit more rigid. So that's also something that we sort of offer with like Q&A support sessions, a community where you can ask questions, and also just helping you along the way. So this is sort of how that looks. So we also offer some consultancy in that direction. And yeah, I think that was it. We did it within 40 minutes, which is great. Once again, we'd love to invite you to a sandbox, which looks exactly like this. So this is on the Canvas learning management system, but it works with any learning management system. And you sort of get all these assignments within that. So you have some Java, some like more web stuff, some Jupyter, SQL, R, Python. And if you have a specific request, just let me know and I can add like a different example in there as well. Feel free to invite your colleagues as well to that if you would like to do that.